Hi, I'm Mitch Gallagher from Sweetwater. I've got something really exciting for you to check out, the latest audio interface from Avid. Let's get started. This is Pro Tools Carbon, the latest audio interface from Avid. It's a very interesting and very exciting interface because it combines all the benefits of DSP-based processing and mixing, along with all the power and the capability of native mixing and processing. The way it's set up is it intelligently manages things so you can use DSP when you're tracking, when you're overdubbing, so you have no latency hits, and you can even track through DSP-based plugins when you're doing that. But then you can also access all your native plugins and do native mixing as well, so you really have the best of both worlds. No latency, but all the power of native and all the power of DSP. Pro Tools Carbon is a complete solution to your studio. It includes a subscription to Pro Tools, as well as a ton of plugins from Avid and other vendors as well. And remember, any AAX DSP compatible plugin can take advantage of the power in Pro Tools Carbon, not just Avid plugins. Plugins from any manufacturer that support that format will be supported by Pro Tools Carbon. Pro Tools Carbon is a full-featured interface that offers 25 inputs as well as 34 total outputs. We've got 8 microphone preamps, 8 line inputs, up to 16 inputs on ADAT optical, and we also have 8 line outputs, dedicated monitor outputs, and 4 headphone outputs. Let's take a tour of Pro Tools Carbon and explore all that it offers. Pro Tools Carbon is designed to offer state-of-the-art, transparent recording quality. We've got resolution up to 32-bit, 192 kilohertz. The other interesting thing about Pro Tools Carbon is that it's an AVB format interface. It connects to your Macintosh using Ethernet and AVB format. This is very easy to set up. I've actually got a Macintosh that doesn't have an Ethernet port, so I'm using a Thunderbolt Ethernet adapter. It's working great. Then inside Audio MIDI Setup, you simply make sure that your Mac knows that you've got a network device connected. At that point, it shows up like any other interface inside Pro Tools or whatever other app you might be running. Let's take a tour of the front panel. Beginning on my far right, we have 2 instrument level inputs. Now let's connect an instrument cable to input number 1. You'll see that we automatically switch to instrument input here on the front panel, and the Z button illuminates. Now we can press that, and it allows us to step through multiple impedance settings. So you can match the input impedance of Pro Tools Carbon to the pickups on your guitar or bass to get the best results. Of course, we can control the gain using the encoder. We've got our power switch here, and we actually have 2 indicator lights above the power switch. One shows that we're connected to the network. If we were using an external clock, the external indicator would also light up. In this case, our clock is coming over network, so that indicator stays off. Now, even though we're connected to the instrument input, we can still select the microphone or the line input on the back panel using the input button. So we can switch to mic level, we can switch to line level, or back to instrument level. We can move through our different inputs by pressing the encoder. 2, 3, 4. Now we're on input 5 now, and inputs 5 through 8 also offer variable impedance. So we can change that using the Z button. There are 3 different settings. We can also link channels in stereo, we can invert the polarity of a channel, and we can engage 48-volt phantom power. A nice feature on the back panel is that we've got Combi XLR 1/4-inch inputs, and that supports both microphone and line level inputs. But we also have a D-sub connector on the back that gives us access to the 8 line level inputs as well. So we can have everything connected simultaneously and then just switch among all those inputs using the input button. Another feature of the front panel is the talkback mic, which is located right here. We engage that by pressing the select switch. We can disengage it, and if we press and hold, the talkback comes on momentarily. We've got 8 LED meters, and those can be switched from input to output. We've also got stereo output meters as well. Pro Tools Carbon offers 8 line level outputs on D-sub, and it also has a dedicated set of monitor outputs. 4 of the outputs on the D-sub can be configured as 2 additional sets of stereo monitors. When we do that, B and C would illuminate here, and we can switch among those using those buttons. Whichever one is activated is the one that we control with the output level. We also have 4 sets of headphone outputs, and those are individually addressable, and we can set the source for those inside the Pro Tools software, as we'll see in just a moment. When we engage that, now we're controlling the headphone level. Last, we have a dim switch for the monitors that reduces the level so you can talk over those, take a phone call, whatever you might need to do. The dim switch does not affect the headphone outputs, only the monitor outputs. So with this capability, we can have 3 sets of monitors connected, we could have 8 microphones, we can have 8 line level signals, 2 instrument level signals, select everything right from within the front panel, and still connect 4 sets of headphones. So the engineer can have a set of headphones as well as 3 musicians, or we could set up 3 musician headphone feeds, cue feeds, and control those from within Pro Tools, feeding them each a separate mix. It's a very full-featured interface. And again, with that DSP-based processing, we have latency-free tracking and overdubbing for all the musicians when we're tracking through Pro Tools Carbon. On the back panel, as I mentioned, we have 8 Combi XLR quarter-inch inputs for mic and line level signals, and then we additionally have those 8 line level signals showing up on a D-sub as well. So this allows us to say with a patch bay, have 8 microphone level inputs configured, 8 line level inputs configured simultaneously, and then select among them just using the input switch. 8 line level outputs are also on D-sub connector, and then we have our dedicated monitor outputs. Ethernet connections allow us to connect up to our Macintosh. We've got clock input and output, and we have 2 banks of ADAT inputs. At resolutions up to 96 kilohertz, we can have 16 channels of ADAT optical going in and out. At up to 192 kilohertz, we can have 8 channels of ADAT optical going in and out. Now let's jump over to Pro Tools and take a look at how that DSP-based monitoring works, as well as some of the settings for Pro Tools Carbon. I've got a large session set up here inside Pro Tools. I've got drums, I've got bass, I've got keyboards, I've got harmony guitars, I've got additional solos from saxophone, I've got horn sections. There's a lot of tracks here, and what I'm going to do is overdub a guitar in. If I was tracking with a native interface in my DAW, I'd have to be very careful about latency. But with Pro Tools Carbon, we've got those HDX chips inside the interface that gives us latency-free overdubbing and mixing, as well as latency-free use of plugins on our inputs. So I'm running through 11 rack, which is my amplifier emulator. I'm also running through the Pro compressor. And I'm feeding my guitar track to a reverb through a bus. The reverb is on this aux input right next to it. To engage the HDX DSP processing inside Pro Tools Carbon, we simply click this icon. It illuminates green, and you can see the plugin slots also have a green indicator. This shows us that these plugins, as well as this input, are now using the DSP processing inside Pro Tools Carbon. And when we do this, you'll notice we don't have to engage DSP processing for anything else in the mixer. Pro Tools is smart enough to manage all of this and to ensure that we have near zero latency with this entire track and its plugins without affecting anything else that's going on inside our mix. But there is one thing we need to be careful of, and that's if we're feeding our signal, as we are here with a reverb send, into a non-DSP plugin. So this is Space from Avid that does not have an AAX DSP counterpart. It's only a native plugin. So let me show you what happens and what we have to be careful of. We'll turn off DSP processing here, and I'm going to turn this off as well. So now if I engage DSP processing on my guitar track again, I get a message. Native plugins have been bypassed because the DSP version is not available. That means that this Space plugin has been disabled because this track is associated with our DSP input track, and this does not have a DSP counterpart. So to prevent this, we can turn this to DSP mode safe, which removes it from the DSP processing. Now when we engage here, our input is coming in this track using DSP. These plugins are using DSP. Our send is routing into this aux, but Space is still running native, so we can still run through that reverb as normal. It's a very cool feature, and again, part of how Pro Tools can intelligently manage all this DSP routing. It's really transparent. You don't have to think about it at all as you're using the mixer. So let me go ahead and grab my guitar here so you can see how this whole process works when we're overdubbing. So we're all set to go, and there's no latency there at all. It feels like I'm playing just through a guitar amplifier. So again, my signal path is, I'm coming into instrument input 1 on Pro Tools Carbon. We're running through 11, which gives us our amp emulation. We've got a compressor here. Then we're using a send to feed into the Space reverb. I've got DSP engaged, so there's no latency with 11 or Pro Comp. I've got DSP safe here, so my native Space plugin is still working on my guitar. So let's go ahead and track. super easy and super transparent to me as a musician. Really makes it as easy as plugging into Pro Tools Carbon, hitting that DSP button, and starting to overdub. The process would be exactly the same if we were tracking with microphones. We simply plug into one of the mic inputs, select it as our input inside Pro Tools, and we're ready to roll. Now let's take a look at some of the settings inside Pro Tools that affect how Pro Tools Carbon works. It's very easy to get Pro Tools Carbon working inside Pro Tools. We simply go up to Setup, choose Hardware, and now we have a few things that we can configure. This is where we set up our monitors, so we can have up to 3 sets of those connected simultaneously and select among them right on the front panel. We have our 4 headphone outputs, and we can choose our source. So headphone 1 in this case is taking its source from the exact same feed as the monitors are getting. Headphones 2, 3, and 4 are taking their feed from the headphone bus, so we can set up an independent mix for those inside Pro Tools. We also have our function switch assignments, so you can see that switch A, B, and C are controlling our monitors, and the select switch is controlling talkback. Here's where we set our talkback mic gain, and this is where we set the amount of dim when we hit the dim switch, and that controls how much the monitors are turned down. We also can configure our line inputs, so we can set whether or not the gain control affects those line inputs. We can bypass that or have the input control set the level for that line input. And we can also set a reference level, either +4 dBu or -10 dBV. That's all the setup there really is. Once Pro Tools Carbon is connected, it's totally plug and play. When we're done with our overdubbing and we're ready to mix, we simply go back and turn off our DSP processing, and now we're working entirely in the native domain. Now we can still access that DSP processing power if, for example, our computer runs out of native processing power. So we simply can engage those even while we're mixing, and now we're using DSP plugins as opposed to native plugins up here. We also can see, using system usage, how much of DSP power we're actually using. You can see I've got my 4 Pultec EQs are using almost all of one chip. We've also got our mixer that's using a chip here. But we still have 6 DSP chips available to us inside Pro Tools Carbon, and we still have all of our native processing power as well. The final thing we should talk about with Pro Tools Carbon is the sound quality. The mic preamps, for example, are super transparent. We have response that's flat within 1/10 of a dB from 20 Hz to 20 kHz. We have equivalent input noise of -129 dB, and our signal to noise level is somewhere around 124 dB down. Excellent specs for those microphone preamps. The conversion is equally transparent and of equally high quality. We've actually got 4 converters on each input, and this gives us stellar results. We've got double precision clocking as well. So the digital capability as well as the analog capability inside Pro Tools Carbon is state of the art. I've had Pro Tools Carbon in my studio now for several weeks, and I've really enjoyed working with it. It sounds awesome, it's so easy to use, and it gives you all that connectivity right in one box. It really is the hub for the entire studio. If you're a musician, if you're a producer, if you're an engineer, you're definitely going to want to check this out. Having that DSP processing power available for mixing, for overdubbing, is tremendous because it allows you to get the best of both worlds, DSP as well as native. It's a great solution. Thanks for checking out Pro Tools Carbon with me today. It's an awesome new interface from Avid, and you're definitely going to want to look at adding one to your studio. I'm Mitch Gallagher from Sweetwater. Thanks for watching. Be sure to like, comment, and subscribe. Click here for more videos like this, or start at sweetwater.com for all your music instrument and pro audio needs.